First of all, I would like to present my acknowledgement for people who has invited me here and also hosting me here today. Usually I take this at the end, but I thought sometimes I miss this when we come to the end of the presentations due to the time limitation, so I take it here. So I thank you all office bearers of IESL for hosting this. Especially special thank goes to Professor Anand Pereira for initiating this event and also organizing the lecture. And again, Engineer Harinda Kodagoda for coordinating and organizing this event. Engineer Kodagoda is actually one of my batchmates, a brilliant batchmates when I was doing chemical and process engineering at the engineering faculty. So I am really happy to see these people and also see you and talk to you. Especially thanks for everybody coming here and sitting here to listen to me. If I go back to this slide, the first one, we are going to talk about this perception of risk. Might be a kind of not clear for you at the very beginning, so that's why we need to describe this in detail during the lecture. I put, you can say I have put two figures here, two separate figures. Sometimes when we talk to people and especially the general public and get their opinion about chemical process industry, chemical industry. If I ask people which figure out of these two would represent or process industry, many people will point out to the left figure. I'm not going to take that survey here because we have a limited crowd and also this is not a good sample because mostly we have engineers here. So if we are doing a good survey, we need a much broader sample. But people have carried out this kind of surveys and always people have a more understanding or more pinpointing towards the left figure. When we talk about chemical process industry, they think it is as a polluting and also dangerous with health hazards, explosions, big fires. Those are the things coming into mind. So that is one thing we need to address, and that is the key thing we are going to address during this lecture. Why it is happening, what are the reasons, what are the background, and how can the stakeholders involved in chemical process industry handle this phenomena to counter these attitudes. Again, before going into the details, I need to clarify this because some of the concepts we are going to explain here has been previously presented. This place in this conference, Estrel 2014, organized by European Safety and Reliability Association. We presented this during last November together with my co-author BScEng, and we have got this paper. So and also it is included in this booklet. So I think I need to tell this to preserve our research ethics and also to thank my co-author. Otherwise, it could look like that all ideas were presented by myself. Right. Now we can really go into the details. I put this topic here as a dilemma of chemical process industry. Why I put it here is that when we talk about chemical process industry, we know that it is inherently involved in our day-to-day life, from pharmaceuticals to food stuff, agricultural things, all the other chemicals, consumable chemicals, and high-tech semiconductor products, all those things coming through this chemical process industry. But the thing is, we rarely see any news article or anything in mass media telling that this chemical process plant has been operating very peacefully and very safely for 25-30 years. That is not the news. News is this. News we see often. Explosions, big fires and pollution, etc. So that is very natural, and there's nothing very unusual, because News is there. News is always related to this kind of unstable developing stories, not a stable, peaceful, safe things. News is always about this unsafe, unsteady developing story. So that first of all we have to understand that. And based on that understanding, we need to look into this phenomena called public risk perception. Because we always talk about safety. These two things go together, risk and safety. But the perception of risk can be quite different from the statistical risk. That is the exact topic that we are going to discuss in little more details today. We know all activities of mankind involve risk, and the specialty here is that the public perception of risk related to chemical process industry and sometimes generally into different industries are not representative of the statistical risk calculation most of the time. That's what we call risk perception. And so that means there is a difference between the statistical risk and the risk perception. Also, we observe that, especially related to this chemical process industry, that public might accept higher level of risk from the other industries like civil construction industry compared to the chemical industry. That is also one phenomena we observe time to time and usually all the time. That is something we are going to describe. That summarizes our aims today here. So we need to address to these stakeholders in chemical process industry and get them enlightened on this public risk perception phenomena. So I will describe some key aspects behind this risk perception and how to plan and do decision making to counter this phenomena. And during that, I will emphasize that strategic risk communication. Risk communication is going to be a key aspect of addressing this risk perception phenomena. Again, some people might ask why we have to worry about this public opinion if we can operate this plant or that plant economically, profitably, productively for a number of period. That has been the attitude for a number of years before, but in this century we are not going to run plants like that, and it will not be sustainable because social acceptability is one of the key things during this century. That's why we need to address this risk perception phenomenon. I invite you, everybody, actually, if you have some questions during the presentation, you can also ask. So I don't mind. You don't have to wait until the end of the lecture. Sometimes it is much more interesting to have some discussion during the presentation. So please raise your questions if you have. This risk perception phenomena comes from this long discussion, layperson versus expert opinion. Because the statistical risk, the risk calculated by safety professionals, that is what we call expert opinion. And that is the opinion in most of the time taken care of or have the validity in the industry. We produce risk analysis reports and put some risk analysis figures and the numbers and the values. Accordingly, safety strategy or philosophy will be planned. That is the normal way of adding these things in the industry. The question is that sufficient? How about the other opinions? In textbooks that's called layperson's opinion, but I would like to refer at human opinion because that is the majority opinion by the community, by the general public out there, outside the plant. What is their opinion? That involves this risk perception. Theoretically, it says that risk perception is subjective, emotional, and contextual. Those are the three most suitable words I found to describe. Because the risk perception is subjective because it can vary depending on the person. the demographic factors, personal experience, gender, age, education, those things. So that is subjective. And that is emotional, because even for the same person, the perception of risk can vary depending on the emotional status of a single person. So that's why it is emotional. And it is contextual because risk cannot be taken out of its context. That is the key difference between statistical risk and the risk perception. Because if you ask a statistician or a safety professional to calculate a similar phenomena like a process fire, if you ask him to calculate the statistical risk of a process fire in this plant or that plant, he will only have some limited number of values, size of the inventory, the material used for the vessel, and those kind of things, technical details. So those two risk figures can be similar, but the perception of these two risks can be very widely different from the place to place, to this community to that community. That is the issue we are addressing today. And I should emphasize, the statistics has very limited value. People do not give credit to the statistics. So only the safety professionals give this credibility to statistics, and that is one aspect. Before going into more details, let's look at some statistical figures related to the chemical process industry. This data quite all, because this kind of surveys are not very often carried out, but according to these figures, let's take first one. Estimated loss of life expectancy, number of days. If we consider the chemical process industry as a dangerous job, I'm not telling that. Working in chemical process industry is not a dangerous job, but even if you assume that it's a dangerous job, this is the comparative figure. Estimated loss of life expectancy could be 300 days. But compared to the other things we face in our life, like cigarette smoking, 2,250, being overweight, 1,300, vehicle accident, 207, like that. So even if we consider this as a dangerous job, there are so many other things we are experiencing or facing higher statistical risk during our life. That is something is not that very clear when we come to risk perception phenomena. Now let's go into the other details. Relative occupational risk in US, 1995 details. Chemical and allied product industry, it is 0.6. It's the value of relative occupational risk of a group of people working in the chemical industry to a general, the mean value of the all workers, or the average job. Average job is 1, chemical allied product industry 0.6. You can see it is even lower than the average job. But look at this, 21, timber cutters 20, taxi driver 95. So you can see even working in the chemical process industry is not a danger. So the people working in the industry are the closest people to this kind of dangerous environment, but still they are not facing that much of statistical risk. Again, if you go to the fatal accident rate, chemical and allied industry 1.2, fishing 42, construction 5, agriculture 3.2. It's not a dangerous, statistically dangerous career. But is that the one we always observe in the open society? This is a survey carried out in 2002 of general public regarding their opinion on chemical processing. They were given these 10 industries and asked them to rank the most favorable and the worst favorable things. You can see the chemical industry has been ranked the last according to the general public. But remember that when they were doing this study, there was some pharmaceutical and biotechnology stuff, but process industry also involved in these things. So, but that is not the idea. That is not the idea directly coming into the mind of general public. So they just restrict to this chemical word. It looks like that. And this is the survey in UK during 1980-2000, the favorability of chemical process industry among general public. So the favorability or the general public opinion has been worsening regarding the chemical industry. Maybe the reason is this development of information technology, so the information flows more rapidly and the wrong impressions or the incorrect information or this perceived risk of this for this general public becoming more wide. So that is the status in the opinion of general public, and that is directly related to this risk perception phenomena. I won't discuss them here, but at least we can look at this ISO 17776 standard definition. That based on that we use this formulas for risk calculations. It's a combination of the probability of an event and the consequences of the event. So there are two different things that we all know very well. When we calculate the risk, we look at the probability or the likelihood, or we look at the consequences. So today we have this formula. That's very famous, and almost everybody knows this. The total risk is the sigma consequences into likelihood. But our concern is this correct? Formula is this formula sufficient enough for our risk assessment in the industry for this century? Remember that because this risk and safety goes together, we can define safety as the freedom from unacceptable risk. That's how I like to define safety, or most of the time that's how we define safety, as freedom from unacceptable risk. Then the question is this word unacceptable. So who define this acceptability? Is that based on statistical acceptability or a social acceptability? The question. If we just consider the statistical acceptability, this formula might be true. But does this include the social acceptability? It doesn't. So that's why we need to consider this risk perception phenomena in chemical process industry. We will discuss that there are a number of qualitative factors that we call risk modifiers. They will define the risk perception, the level of perception of the risk perceived by So I told you before that two similar statistical risk events can have widely different perceptions among different communities, for example. So from this point onwards, I will go through some of these modifiers that we have identified important for chemical process industry. One thing is what we call familiarity. It has been noticed that people feel more secure with the familiar environment. That is very understandable. And do resistance when there is a new chemical process plant coming to their neighborhood. But with the time goes on, if nothing happens, people say, okay, this is safe now. They cool down and do nothing. But what is happening in reality? In reality, what is happening is with the aging of this facility, the statistical risk increases. Actually, at the very beginning, it is quite high, but then it becomes low, and then it becomes higher. It's like a bathtub curve, that theoretically it is a bathtub curve. When the process plant starts right today, it will the aging facilities. But that is not represented by this perception. People become with a higher risk at the beginning, and then it goes down, almost nothing at the end, when it is the highest risk of aging equipment. So then the risk and the risk perception does not go together. Complexity. One thing we have noticed, or the people have observed related to chemical process plant is that they are kind of mysterious entities for people outside the plant boundaries. It's not like a water dam. If there is a water dam in or a reservoir, people see, and there's no mystery in that. And even though a dam can have a higher statistical risk compared to a process plant, people do not fear about the dam because it is very easily understandable, but not the chemical process facilities. They don't know what is going in inside these walls, what kind of mysterious machineries, chemicals, dangerous chemicals they think. So that is one thing, because they think, they see these things as complex entities that affect their risk perception, that affects. So that is a powerful modifier affecting their mindset about the process industry, the risk involved in the process industry. So what can, in some occasions, if there is an issue in the community, one good thing is just ask them to come and see the facility. Just come and see the facility, have some field visits. So that sometimes works, that works sometimes, because then people understand that it's not as dark as they think or dangerous as they think. Media coverage. This has been researched in many different articles. What is the impact of media on public opinion of industries, chemical industries and other industries? It is quite complicated because there are so many complexities. The true impact of media on human beings. But generally it is accepted that generally amplify this risk perception. That means they encourage more fear or higher risk level than it is really is. So that is the thing we usually see in media. So, for example, we saw those things even during last couple of years in some of the incidents in Sri Lanka, Ratupaswala, etc. So media played a big role. So I told you this, that because media existing this some dreadful, disturbed, dangerous things, not in calm, safe occurrences. And it is very important that industry should, irrespective of this bad media, it is very, very important for industry, any industry, to maintain good relations with media. That is the one key strategy of risk communication. You are not going to win a battle against media by having hostile attitudes as an industry. So that is a key thing in risk communication. Also, it has been noticed that less knowledgeable and less experienced sectors can be easily mediated. That is understandable. Previous fatal experiences. That's one thing. People with high intolerance for fatal accidents, if they have come up with a similar experience before. For example, in this tsunami case, we saw that around 15 to 20% people within 1 kilometer perished in some of the areas. So what happened is, after that we saw that there were so many false occurrences. People were running out of the beaches and evacuating unnecessarily, telling that there will be a tsunami. But what is the statistician's opinion? I got this figure from one report. Actually, it is prepared by some statistician, Norwegian. It says a similar event can occur around 300 to 400 years. That is the statistical risk given for this kind of megathrust event. So that is the difference between this risk and risk perception. So the people do not follow statisticians or the safety professionals. Equity. Again, this is a one modifying factor, that public will accept more risk. Public will accept more risk if they think that this risk is equally distributed among a vast majority of the public, rather That is one modifier factor. We saw a similar kind of things when we read about this locating of this coal power plant, etc. during past years in Sri Lanka. That isolated communities, they resist because they think they have been targeted. That's what their perception. So they see a higher risk than the real risk level, or we cannot say real risk, but statistical risk at least, because I don't like to say that is the accurate one, this is not the incorrect one, that is not the opinion I am going to give you, because statistician's risk is valuable. People that they feel the safety, because I believe that safety is not only guaranteed, it must be felt. So safety will not be felt until you are satisfied with the acceptable level of risk. And benefits. It has been used many times. If people around the community in that industry see that there is economic or other benefit from that industry, they might feel or perceive a less risk. And when they don't have any benefit, that will accelerate the risk perception. So that is one thing that can from the surrounding community. And when we read about this, some of these newspapers, news articles related to this Ratu Hostel incident and etc., we saw in the newspapers these completely opposite attitudes, right? So this is going against this theoretical or the observed concepts. So if they have followed these kind of concepts, they could have had a much better solution rather than the eventuality we observed there. Cultural values and social norms, that is also an important factor affecting people's opinion. For example, certain meat industries has been resisted by some communities, like that. Social norms of a particular society at a particular era. So this risk perception is not a constant entity. It evolves with the social norms and the cultural behavior, and also the time and the era. We see that about 200 years or 200 years ago in Europe, there was a high death rate among these coal mine workers, and that is accepted. At that time, it was the normal. That is accepted in Europe at that time, but no longer accepted because it has been evolved to a certain level. So it is not the social norm in the world. We see that death rate in coal mine workers. So because their social norm is still or at that level. So that's a factor. So the statistical risk might be same from there to there, but the perception among people varies communities to the communities according to their social norms. Voluntariness and control, that is kind of a aspect we observe time again and again. People, if they have a voluntariness or free will to choose, they will tolerate a much higher risk level. But if they don't accept, they will only accept a much lower risk level. So, for example, when in sporting events, people take much higher risk. In driving, people take much higher risk. But they will fiercely resist if there is a process facility coming into their neighborhood with statistically very, very low risk level compared to even driving. Because this is not voluntary. This is something coming into their neighborhood without their say. So that is one key thing. One thing we can use to neutralize this kind of perceptions is allow them to have their say. Allow them to have their say. So their opinion, the perceived risk can go down. It will go down. So those are the kind of strategies that stakeholders can use during these key decisions to locate industries, process plant, the investments related to process facilities, etc. Artificiality. That's one good thing, because we observe that if people observe certain thing is natural event or a natural entity or a natural matter, they will feel less risk compared to completely artificial one or the artificial chemical or a completely new thing. In Gujarat, that happens around 10-15 years before Bhopal. We know about Bhopal because Bhopal is considered to be the turning point in process safety. We see that before Bhopal, there has been a slight couple of 5-10 articles on this process safety every year. After Bhopal, it skyrocketed to 70, 80, 100 every year. So, we define this Bhopal event as a key event in process safety. That is the turning point in process safety as a subject area. But in Bhopal, we observe, we say that, even non-governmental organizations, the exact amount of death is not exactly defined. It varies from around 3,000 to 20,000 or 3,000 to 18,000. It is controversial. So, but again, this dam failure, Machu dam failure that happens couple of years before Bhopal, again, the amount of deaths reported is around 4,000 to 25,000. It is either same range of Bhopal or even worse than Bhopal. But the point I am going to emphasize is that still we talk about Bhopal, but Machu it is only a historical event and it is not repeated again and again and again in the media. But not like that Bhopal. We still see that even after decades of this tragedy, it is still being repeated as a representative case for process industry. That is the problem we have today. Because when we talk about chemical processing industry, the image created in people's mind is Bhopal, Deepwater Horizon, or Piper Alpha, those kind of things. So that is the key thing related to this, one key thing related to this perception phenomenon. So Bhopal, it involves methyl isocyanate. In Machu dam failure, it involves water. So water is very familiar. So water is very familiar, but not methyl isocyanate. So that's why the people talk about this. So that is one thing we have to understand when talking about risk perception phenomena related to process industry. Permanency. It is also one key factor. People will feel more risk if they think that the results, consequences are irreversible, like a nuclear facility. Sometimes, again, we see that nuclear power generation or nuclear power plants coming into their neighborhood or coming into their country. Based on what? Based on statistics? No. If you look at the statistics, nuclear power is quite safe compared to other power, many other power sources. So the resistance is not coming from the statistics, coming from some other things. This risk perception is coming from other things, like previous incidents like Chernobyl or anything, or the nuclear weapon test. They know what happens in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So the power plant is associated with those deaths happen in the nuclear weapon discharge. And then it's so funny that sometimes people will resist a nuclear power plant coming to their neighborhood, having a statistical risk 10 times lower than their neighborhood dam, water dam. Still they resist. That is the thing we see related to this perception. Dreadfulness. Again, the same example we can take, because people scared of sudden dreadful occurrences, sudden death, process fires, explosion, those things, and they don't care much about. They don't feel that level of risk related to other things like being overweight, smoking. Those kind of things, because their consequences are slower and not dreadful as a process fire, but statistically much higher rate. If you look at the statistics, people are killed every day due to this poor health practice, food practice, those things. But they are not dreadful as a process fire, process accident. That affect their perception. Phase of consequences also. If the people can see that there are consequences rapidly happening and very observable, they resist that. For example, when I was working in a small work related to software, Sri Lanka, we have this water treatment facility. Whenever we have a small color from nectar or something producing, people come, they come from the neighborhood. Oh, what are you doing? This bad water going outside. But we could have same heavy metal or anything with this water without any problem. So that's why we call this, because these resistances, perceptions depend on what they can observe. Demographic factors, that is quite complicated because there has been many studies done on demographic factors. We can give to educational level, ethnicity, gender, age, income, occupation. There are many studies done on that. Also, there are various intricacies based on these observations. I can give you some few examples, like some studies suggest that men had a higher risk acceptance to chemical industry compared to women. Younger people were more likely to accept chemical industries compared to over 50 age people. Maybe older the people, they will take less risk compared to young people. Farmers and housewives had less risk absolutely compared to other populations. These are based on different research studies or surveys done on chemical process industry. People in the middle income category were highly resistive to compared to low and high income, because maybe the high income category people, they have options or they can face consequences. Meanwhile, the low income people, they will benefit from these industries. So they will not, either of them will not resist as much as these middle income people. So there are such different things related to demographic factors. The important is the stakeholders who is going to take decisions on the positioning of a chemical process facility or a modifying an existing facility need to address these issues, need to look at this in details. For the moment, it is not stakeholder, the key is investor. These can be really important factors. So if you are going to position a process facility in a certain area, you should have a clear view of these demographic things, demographic picture. What kind of people live there? What kind of ethnic background have they? Are they educated people or the other? What kind of people there? These things very important to take into consideration before you take your investment decisions or industrial decisions, because they all have consequences in the risk perception. Again, we observe Sri Lanka. When I look at those news articles related to the positioning of coal power plants, we can see sometimes when we try to, or the government try to put it in a certain place due to some other reasons. Maybe it is the best place due to the emission and the position. But the surrounding community feels a different story. They think, okay, this is just pushing on us because we are an ethnic community, minor ethnic community. So these things are very sensitive. So the decision makers must consider these aspects before they can act on. Trust. Safety management, I would call this trust of the people handling the safety, public safety or industrial safety, that is extremely important, because outside community, if they can trust the people who are regulating this the industry, who are managing this industry, or who are really doing the safety related work, they might accept higher risk level than they would have in another situation. That has been seen over and over again. Even during this Deepwater Horizon incident, accelerated their risk perception. Even when the company was doing their best, or as we can see, if they were doing their best, people did not accept that simply because they did not have trust on these people. Maybe that is also true for some of the huge outroars we saw in Sri Lanka during last couple of years, industrial outroars. If they had more trust on the people handling this incident, for example, industrial management, if they had a trust or if they had a better track record during their previous occurrences with the surrounding community, this might not have accelerated to this level. That is fire which can submerge other risk modifiers, because as I told you before, communities, people will accept higher risk level from a trusty person than an untrusted management. So the trust is one best thing a management, safety management or industrial management can acquire to address this kind of issues. So I would talk a little bit about this decision making, not going into detail, much deeper level of details. To emphasize is that the industrial decision makers should not base their decision only on statistical risk, considering it as the scientific opinion. That is the key thing I want to tell you actually, because statistical risk might be the scientific truth, but what is happening in the ground level is the risk perception, what is felt by the human, what is felt by the people. That is not the engineers or scientists out there in the industry, out there in the street going to study these reports. It's just the general public, and the risk they feel is the true risk out there in the field. It is not just the risk value we saw it in the risk assessment. It should be done and it should be taken very seriously, but decision making must not only depend on this statistical risk or the safety experts risk. They should consider the public opinion outside their plant perimeters, because if you don't do that, we will continue to see many incidences like what we have seen in past days. For example, Ratupaswa. Those kind of things can happen. I observe that they could have managed that incident in a much better understanding about risk perception. And they could have avoided such unfortunate incidences very easily if they have followed very fundamental philosophies that we discuss in this risk perception stuff. Again, I will summarize everything actually right here with this one, because I saw you that small equation at the beginning that risk is a function of E is the threat event, consequences and probabilities. These are the three things we usually is that enough? Probabilities and consequences, is that enough? I believe that is not enough actually. What we need is to include this as social acceptability. So if there is a true phenomena or the true formulation of risk, we need to include this social perception in addition to the statistical calculations in this equation. But then the question is, can we really model this? That is one question, because at the end of the day, we would prefer, as engineers, we can quantify these things, not just the concepts. If we can quantify these social acceptabilities, that will be much better. Then we can update our risk assessment reports. For the moment, what we can see in risk assessment report is just the statistical value, not the social acceptability as a quantitative figure. And that is on research, that is undergoing research. There are various different theories suggested. Some are psychological involving theories, some are socio-economic theories, and some people are trying to quantify this social acceptability. But the thing is, it can be very complicated depending on the situation, but at least for some of the simple cases, we believe it is possible if we have quantify this social acceptability into the risk studies, risk assessment. Right. So once again, we emphasize that when we take decisions related to the process facilities, we have to take care of the opinion of local communities, and it is not only for the beginning, because sometimes when they locate the process facility, okay, they will have some dialogue with the surrounding community and take their opinion, and then they just forget everything and they just run the facility. But the key thing about safe ongoing entity throughout the whole life cycle phases of a process plant. That is the most important thing, because we know that process facility has different life cycle phases: feasibility study, the basic engineering, detail engineering, commissioning, production, modification, and eventually decommissioning. So the safety should go from this feasibility study to decommissioning. And same is true for this risk communication and assessment of risk perception. It should go through whole life cycle phases until decommissioning. Level, the decision should reflect that public opinion, public risk perception has been taken into account. It should not just as face saving means. Sometimes I know that even in some other countries, okay, they will have some public dialogue, and they just to show that they have care about the public, but it is not sufficient. Somehow, may not be 100%, but to a certain degree, the eventual decision should reflect the public opinion. Otherwise, public cannot be cheated for every day, because for all the time. Because if they see that, okay, industry just talk to not solve anything. Risk communication, yeah, those are the techniques we need to use while having this dialogue with the communities, while having the dialogue with the public. So there are certain rules we need to follow for risk communication. So actually, the risk communication, when we talk about risk communication, it is not only the public, but we have to include all stakeholders, investors, pressure groups like environmental groups, and maybe the public leaders, religious leaders, and all those communities, all those groups have. And the most key thing is that the two-way dialogue, that is the key word here actually. So in risk communication, it does not mean that we will put some leaflet to the public or the community surrounding, or just give some information or something like that. It's not the way. We need two-way communication. We need to express our opinion as industry. We need to take their opinion as their public, and there should be interaction and there should be results. What is really happening? Yeah, in some countries actually, I'm not sure about Sri Lanka. I know that before you can start this industry or before you can really move in your facilities there, you need to have this dialogue with the surrounding communities and sometimes with the general public. Because also, according to regulations, many industries handling hazardous material, they need to take it public. They need to tell the public what are the hazardous material, what are the quantities, how they handle, how they store, and what are the possible accidents, what could happen. Everything they need to tell the public. I'm not sure about the Sri Lankan law, how they handle these kind of things, but that is the trend that world is going on. So we cannot these regulations and to face these things. The right to know is a principle that generally accepted internationally, because as a general public, you can claim, I want to know what is going in this facility, what are the material you have. That is the right to know. So then industry will have to give the details. Timely engagement is very important. That's what we haven't seen in many incidences in Sri Lanka. Because if we wait until the last moment to address this public opinion crisis, to become public outroar, so that's the last thing we it is just opinion. If we wait until it becomes outroar, it's completely different level. Then we cannot even apply some of these principles, because then it is outroar, it's a conflict. It's not just an opinion. We should not wait until that level. We have to have the risk communication with the public and solve at that level before it comes to outroar level. Because if it comes to outroar level, it's a completely different set of groups we have to involve. Media, pressure groups, environmental groups. Handling those groups are much more difficult than handling the normal public. So that's why we should not wait until that level. Yeah. So there are a few key guidelines for this risk communication. One thing is actually give the full picture, because I have seen many people, sometimes engineers and the managers tell that, okay, we cannot explain this to general public, this is too complicated, this is too technical, we should not try to tell this to public, we cannot explain. That is not the case. We should not undermine the knowledge of general publics. If we have clear details, we should present this to the public. This is the process. This is the process diagram going on this facility. This is happening in this. With all details, thinking that it is too complicated to understand, to be understood. Eventually, if something happens, people will think that we withhold these details purposely to hide something. That should not be the impression going into the general public. So that's why we have to tell everything openly and give a full picture happening in the plant. And public must be heard. That's what I told you before, that in two-way communication, we explain our situation, our plant, and we take their opinion. But at the end of the day, our decision should reflect their opinion. Sometimes we might feel that their opinion are but we have to be very careful that we should not completely avoid their ideas being implemented just because they are unscientific. That should not be the case. I told you before, because at the end of the day, risk is not just a statistic, risk is what they felt at the ground level. So even if what they are telling is unscientific, to a certain degree, that should be reflected in our decision making process. And yeah, that's what I tell, that do not overimpose scientific opinion. During this two-way communication, we should not try to overimpose, telling that, okay, what you are telling is completely degree, because then public will think, okay, these guys are not hearing us, they are not taking anything of us, and then the communication will break down. From that point onwards, there is no two-way communication, it's only unidirectional communication, and that's not effective. Targeted communications if necessary. Yeah, I told you sometimes these ethnic communities, they might have a different set of questions. Then we have to target those communities. Maybe we have to target religious leaders, the community leaders, address to them. They can address their communities in a different language. So sometimes targeted communication is necessary. And the communicators, that is very important. The people who is doing these communicators must have they might have their own engineers and knowledgeable people. So when they ask certain question, if the communicators fail or communicators give a wrong answer, the communication is down, because from that point onwards they will not trust communicators. The trust is the most important thing. If it is failed, then the communication is failed. And sometimes we do need to do education campaigns. That's reality, because sometimes the people out there, they don't have any knowledge about this process facility. So if that is the case, we might do some education campaigns, but they should not look like emphasizing our opinion on them. They must be just education campaigns. Addressing these things, but the main thing is industry must have this good relations with media despite their bad publicity. If they, I told you that industry should not try to have a battle against media just because they are publishing a bad impression about our plant, because if industry try to fight back, it can even worsen. Of course, industry can have their own media campaigns. They can have their own media campaigns, but even in that case, that should not look like advertisement. It should not look like advertisement. It should look like a genuine. We come to end of this presentation with these conclusions. The key thing I wanted to tell you is that industrial risk has a social dimension, not just the scientific statistical figures. They have a social dimension. So that means risk is something beyond likelihoods and consequences. It is something beyond probabilities and consequences. It has a social dimension that we need to address as an industry when we take our decisions. So we discussed different factors affecting this, influencing these risk. And actually you can refer to our paper we published in Estrel. We have got more details in the paper. You can write to me if you really have a copy, because I can give free copies for you unless you find it in the literature. Yeah, also we give some very brief guide about handling these issues, risk communication, etc. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I am happy to discuss these things.
One of the main problems with this adverse public perception is lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
So since these are raw materials and products are based chemicals and things like that. Now when a company applies this environmental protection license, they apply. They have an application form where they give details, right? So in Norway, do they publish those details? Can that be made a public document?
Yeah, effectively they are public, because people can access these things.
Application.
If they really want. Of course, again they have this right to know laws, and also related to the hazardous industries. Of course, they have to publicly give these details. For example, we have one of these urea manufacturing plant. They give these details gas mask safety equipment in case of accident. Because then the community knows there will be a possibility of this kind of accident. It is very less risk, they have been explained, but still that can happen. And but they don't run away because they have been detailed, given information with this safety instruction, and they have been given very clear instruction what are the actions to follow if there is accident warning. So those things are done.
And the disaster management plan.
Right.
That can reduce the public fear.
Yeah. Even in Bhopal, what we saw was that the last barrier was this disaster management, but there is no disaster management plan at all. So that's how. Thank you.
Can you give an example of a process industry that has gone through the area where they engage with the public and explain the risk? Because normally when you go to the area and explain that you're putting in a new plant, people will be afraid because there's a risk. So do you have examples where company has done that successfully?
For example, risk communication programs. Many companies have their own risk communication programs. That's one example actually I told you. We have one I have a Norway manufacturing plant. That has been very old plant. I'm not really sure at the very beginning they did that. Communication program that addresses surrounding community and they give details about the plant and also safety instructions, what to do in a situation. And they have access to quantities in the plant, what are the variables inside the plant, what quantities, how they handle, and the processing. So in many countries, for example, that law in North America, in US we have that law that people, industries handling this hazardous material, they have publicly tell quantities, amount, how they handle. That is the law. And also the right to know principle. In many countries in Europe, the people can make the request, tell what is going on here, what is happening, what are the quantities if they don't have the right to know. It's a new trend even in the industry to have this kind of continuous dialogue with the communities, not only at the beginning, throughout the life cycle until the future. Because the safety must be a life cycle process, not only at the beginning. And I got to idea also, of course, in the industry, at the very beginning, there will be a high level of fear of this industry coming in the neighborhood. So then, but due to that fear, we should not be called any fears. That can be more disastrous in the future. It's much better if you explain everything at the very beginning and take the results at that stage, rather than you build the facility, something happens, some leak happens, and then the community resists. That is the worst case scenario, rather than taking it.
How would you make engagement with the community? Would you, like, example, how would you go to meetings or find?
There should be a kind of dialogue strategy. This is the philosophy. So there should be a strategy how to address. So first you take the demographic factors taken into consideration. First do your own work. So you study the community and they take demographic and then you plan your strategy, plan your communication strategy. Because there are demographic factors that you have to take into consideration for planning this communication, communication strategy. Like for example, you might target community leaders, religious leaders. They can address separately. And so you can have communities, smaller, general mass media. So those kind of things. So short films, movies. Those are being used in modern day industries. Especially the coming years, more and more prominent phenomena. I'm not telling you this is 100% happening everywhere in the world, every country, but this is the trend now we do, and it's going on. Actually, in some countries, it's in a very
couple of questions.
Yes. One is how do you look at long-term risks
because most of the incidents are electronic events or acute events,
Mm.
and you
Yes.
calculate risk for those.
Yeah.
But there are, say, as well as say the product itself may have a risk at some point of time in the disposal phase, for example. And how do you look at that? And also, say, as he pointed out, new technologies like say emerging technologies like nanotechnology or biotechnology, where the risks are not known and you cannot quantify and you don't know the risk as well. So how do you approach that kind of?
Yeah, I think the key strategy in the communication should be open. We like to say that if you are not exactly, if the risk is not exactly quantifiable at this stage, we just have to explain that in that way. So, then the result is that either community will extremely or then the thing is, it is much better to address at that level at the very beginning. The community is highly resistive, then we have to take the other options, moving to a complete separate location. So I think that should be the strategy to address these things. To be open and do what we have exactly. Without pretending, because that is one mistake that some industries make. They pretend that they know everything. Like even in this Deepwater Horizon incident, at the very beginning, they showed the world, but they showed the world is that we have 100% control. So that was on the case. Then after a couple of days, after a couple of weeks, the world showed that they don't have a control at all. Then their situation worsened. If they don't have the very beginning, we are correct picture. Short answer.
How do you approach the long-term risk? How do you explain that?
Yes, right. For example, there can be some fugitive or small emissions. There can be health problems, especially to the workers. I saw that because this risk report, they include these things. Because actually, because every industry they need to have this assessment in there will be a risk picture. So the risk picture includes fatal accident rates and also personal harm due to these things for a long time. So that is included in this risk report. Those risk reports are open to the workers who are, especially those special workers who are what kind of health risks they might experience during their lifetime. And there are counteractions like reduction of work time, like shifting, etc. Shift work changes. So people coming into the work, they come with this open data for the knowledge. The similar can be applied for outside country. But the thing is, when you have this government regulations, they fix this picture to a certain frame so that it should not be exceeded. So that's why once again, that if the public have high trust regarding these regulators at the top, it will be much easier to handle these things. Trust their regulators, they know that they will take care of these long-term issues and those kind of things to a certain degree. But despite that, industry should be open and give their own data and be open without crossing something and revealing it later might be the worst case. But I like that sometimes even the industry might not have the exact 100% idea about this risk, long-term risk. So that in that case they have accepted. They don't know. For example, in this genetically modified food, there are some resistances, and people or the industry might not have 100% accurate picture about this long-term impact. Same for this impact of radiation from mobile phones. So it's not known. But it is safe until under the normal knowledge, the knowledge we have right now, but it might not safe in another dimension of knowledge. So these are quite complicated in the long run.
Just a follow-up question. When we're talking about long-term risks, for example, one specific all I had was we asbestos industry, for example.
Yeah.
How to know in other countries that asbestos is very highly regulated. So,
Yes, asbestos is actually quite great in Europe in most of the states.
so that's an example where there is some law, but there's a lot of ways in Sri Lanka.
Yeah. That's right. I mentioned about the social norms. That is the 100% correct way I can explain that. The social norms are different from communities to communities. In China, for example, there are happening hundreds of deaths every year in this oil plant, oil mining accidents. That happened in Europe 200 years ago, but not now. So that is again the acceptability of the risk in different communities. I'm not telling that they are 100% unified all over the world. Similarly, asbestos, that is highly regulated and actually banned in most of the European states. Actually, Norway banned around 18 years ago or 20 years ago, and still we are using it. So maybe the community might not have a complete picture that this ban is. You can always have fear of this. So then it will be really interesting if you are talking about the new asbestos plant coming into here and telling this truth about this ban in Europe. So in that case, in those cases, the regulators, government, have a much bigger responsibility to update the knowledge base and get their regulations out there the rest of the world.
Now, in this situation in Sri Lanka, it's not they will go to the asbestos manufacturers to educate about it.
No, it's not anywhere, it is not fair. In that case, they have a practical problem of doing that to education because that's why I'm telling you in that case, the regulators have a much bigger responsibility. So you get so like asbestos, every industry can have certain negative impact to the community and to the world and to the environment. The reality is that they are honoring their values, and if they are truthful, they should not hide these from the general public. There's no
Since there are no questions, I would like to propose the vote of thanks. But before that, I would like to mention now, he came out with public perception of chemical industries, which is most of the people consider chemical industries as polluting industries, dangerous, fire hazards and so on. But really, from the time we wake up in the morning till we sleep at night, we are using chemicals, right? Toothpaste, detergents, soaps, right? Then the paints, varnishes, the fuel that you use in your vehicle, all are chemicals, right? And the service rendered by the chemical industry is very much higher than the perception of risk that people have in mind. A good example is, I can give a good example which and earlier they were using talc as the lubricant, because when you want to put the glove into your hand, it should be lubricated. They were using talc, right? Then they want to chlorinate the interior inner surface so that without talc they can do it. Then the entire factory was resistant to this chlorination, right? Then there was this one Mr. Justin. He is a very senior engineer in Sri Lanka, mechanical engineer. He was requested to persuade these people that this is not a hazard. Then he called me, right? Then both of us went to Sri Lanka and we had to demonstrate. So what I did was, I gave a lecture. I said, chlorine is a very, very important chlorine. Then I mentioned that without chlorination, all the water sources in the world which we drink, the water that we drink will be polluted and we will die, right? Because microorganisms will grow and the sanitation and health of people will be, compromised, right? Then what I did was, I dissolved chlorine into a vessel, right, to the proportion that they were going to use. Then I dipped my hand and showed that, there is nothing wrong with chlorine, right? And then I requested those who feel they can come and to dip their hands and see, right? Then that is how this perception, right? Advertisement by Unilever, right? Where, there is the first kind of advertisement which I have seen, which are fantastic, right? So this advertisement starts with a person walking on his hands, right, upside down. Then he walks on his hands, right, using his hands. Then he goes to a temple, Kovil, and he stands up, and then only the story starts, right? This man, he had lost 4 of his children due to diarrhea, right, and cholera. Because of soap, right, and sanitation, the vow to walk with his hands from his house to the Kovil, right? So that showed that soap had done tremendous human service to people by making them healthier, right, and preventing deaths, right? Whereas if you look at a soap plant, I mean, there will be some pollution, there will be some smoke going right through the stacks, and there will be some wastewater, right? So the company has the responsibility of educating people, right, that without these things, the mankind will be worse off than with these things. But unfortunately, we are, right? If you don't have soap, what will happen? Millions of people will die, right? Whereas if you have a soap plant, there will be some pollution which you can address, right? So this is the problem. Actually, our problem is most of the people they don't understand science, right? So education is the key. So if they are taught, educated, I mean, I think each and every person, right, child should be educated in science, chemistry, physics, biology, economics, political science, everything, so that finally they will understand what's happening in the world. Otherwise, what will happen is they will have their own, way of thinking, which is baseless. So I think now when you have has all the information, so that should be made public, especially when you have high risk, industries, so that at least, as you mentioned, the community leaders, because each and every person that can't understand these things, community leaders like say priests, fathers, rectors, and all the people, they should get this information and inform the public, and also especially schools. Now there was another advertisement in India where they educated children, school children, and the school children went and educated the parents, because parents were basically illiterate. So that's the kind of action that should be taken. So useful lectures, and he's a key man in risk assessment, disaster management, and safety, right, in Norway, and we are very proud that he has achieved this status. He was a graduate from the University of Marutua about 10, 11, 12 years back. No? 12 years back. Then he got a first class, and then he served at the university for some time. Then he also served in the industry also, I think, for some time. Then he went for his MSc, then he got his PhD, and now he's give us lectures, which are very useful to all of us. And we thank you very much for doing that, despite your short schedule, right? And you will be leaving on the
On 7th.
7th. So, with very short notice, he came and delivered lecture. There's another lecturer, prospecting lecturer, right? And we hope you also will deliver lecture, next week or week after, right? Before you leave, right? Okay, then thank you very much. And I thank all of you all for your, presence here, which made this lecture a great success, right? And as a token of